Welcome to Business Beyond Borders, the go-to podcast for CPA firms seeking transformative insights. I'm your host, Lawrence Whittam, and with each episode we'll uncover key insights, best practices, and invaluable resources tailored for CPAs. From trending strategies to diving deep into outsourcing and offshoring, our experts will help in all areas of your business. Hey everyone, welcome. This is Lawrence Whittam from Impact Global Solutions. Thanks for joining me today. I actually have Andrew Ferrigno, and the area that we're going to talk about today is a little bit about what he's doing. And the idea of this series is to share with firms some additional resources who they can use to look into areas of their business to help impact it and make it more successful. So Andrew, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Lawrence, for taking time to help me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I would love to, do you want to start off, just give a quick intro about yourself, brief introduction, who you are, what you're doing now as well. I know that you've recently come into this area, right, as a consultant. So would love to sort of know what you've been doing, a bit of your history so that everybody knows who you are.
Sure, Lawrence, thanks. Yes, I've been an operations executive for almost 25 years, mostly in legal, more recently with CPA firms, helping them advise on their operations and business challenges, and to make sure that they're being successful in all the areas that cover operations. I've been able to see, finance, HR, a lot of the internal processes, outsourcing as well. And I've been able to help firms advise them and put processes and solutions together for firms to be successful in all these major areas.
Cool. Now, and can you tell me what you're doing now? Like, do you have certain areas you're focusing on with firms? Because you're now working on this sort of somewhat single-handedly, right? From that perspective, coming in as more of a consultant for firms to help with specific areas. So can you sort of break down, like, are there core responsibilities you're focusing on, or?
Yes, certainly. There's four specific core areas that I'm focused on. The first one is performance optimization and talent enhancement. The second is technology, strategy, and alignment. The third is executive performance alignment. And the last one is strategic partnerships and operational support. So these are critical areas of operations in any business, small or large, that should demand attention by the executive team to ensure that things are happening. Normally these types of things are handled by chief operating officers or vice presidents or head of operations. And it's important that the attention and the budget put to these items to make sure that you're developing a consistent and repeatable product for your clients, ensuring no mistakes or as little mistakes as possible. So that's currently what I'm doing for the C-suite and Whitman Transition clients.
And now you are and remind me, are you focused solely on CPA firms? Are you focused on businesses? And if so, like, what size firms or businesses are you typically working with?
Typically, right now, we're focused on CPA firms, and the ones we're focused on right now are really anything up to 20 million. And that covers a real large swath of firms at this point. But these can also be applied. These are best practices in any business, CPA, any professional services, even family office, or really any businesses. These are just best practices that some people just don't remember to do, or they're just not they're not educated on what they need to do to run operations from a business standpoint. A lot of professional service firms, are driven by, partners and principals who own the firm, but they're not necessarily trained on the right way to do, operations and how to handle operations. It's a much different, sometimes, skill set, the amount of detail and attention that's needed to make sure that these things are successful to support the rest of the firm. That's the kind of area where I come in and I could help, navigate those things and put some programs and some things in place to make sure that they're doing as designed.
And typically, they're billable, right? So they're also have a priority of working sort of in the business rather than on the business, right? And again, picking up who does what is a common area, right? It's difficult for a lot of firms until they reach a certain size to actually separate the partners into working on the business rather than in it, right? So now, so you went over sort of 4 core areas. So let's sort of start at number 1, right? So like, can you explain a bit more as to like the performance optimization and the talent enhancement? Like, what does that really entail when it comes to a firm? Like, what do you mean by that?
So performance optimization really is understanding and documenting your processes to understand where the skills, there's either a skills gap or a technology gap or, a training gap, or maybe you just don't have the right amount of resources or too many resources in one particular area and not enough in another. So if you follow a process from start to finish and understand all the different pieces and see where you can affect change in those areas to improve, that's really, what that means, and understanding what has to happen there to then make that process successful. The talent enhancement really falls directly under, the HR and learning development umbrella. A lot of firms don't invest in learning and development and training their staff from a skills standpoint. And it's very important to understand where the skill gaps are so that you can then apply the correct training to those particular areas to make sure that then it's being successful. There's been so much change in technology and business and processes, in the past few years that sometimes it's very difficult to keep up. But identifying it is really the first step. And then what you need to do to apply to adjust to close the gap is something different. And that's going to be a business decision. And in some cases, you may take some of these processes and either stop doing them because they're inefficient, they don't make sense, or create a new process, which then needs additional technology or training, maybe to take up, some of that gap. So
you touched on a few areas of where you can possibly sort of step in and help there as well. But is there like one specific or one top problem that firms are facing when it comes to these areas and then also like how can you specifically help them to overcome that problem?
Yeah. So to me, HR is a very underfunded particular area. It's always been underfunded. To me, I think you need the right, balance of HR staff, and I don't mean generalists. You need good people doing talent acquisition. You need good people doing retention. You need really good people understanding what the gaps are and the skills are, and understanding client needs to make sure that you're hiring and getting the right people to do those particular tasks. So, to me, HR is a key focus area that sometimes goes unnoticed, but you really need to have a strategy for HR, and those are some of the things that I've helped firms do and restructure HR as needed, or bring in additional providers. Sometimes it's just even around benefits. If you don't have a good benefits, compensation person, typically that's also an area, especially now in this, in this job market, you really need to have a performance, benefits that align with the rest of the industry to actually get the right talent. So to me, that's just another example of an area that is also under-resourced.
Cool. Now, and I think the second bit was more around like technology strategy and like how you align that within the firm. So when it comes, can you give me a bit more detail into that specific core area as to what it is initially?
Sure. So, almost every firm uses some type of technology at this point for almost everything. It's not always that, you can't just throw a tool at it. I hear all the time that everyone says, oh, just buy this application or throw this at it. Oh, this will fix that problem. It's not always a technology solution that fixes things. Sometimes it makes things worse. If you need to understand what you're trying to address and then apply the technology to it. Otherwise, you're going to have complications later on down the line, and it's not going to be, successful. So that's one key area. The other thing for technology specifically is that it changes all the time. Constantly vendors are sending updates and patches. And there's a gap between a lot of the programs that are used out there that sometimes are not identified at the start of using this particular vendor or particular software. But as you grow and expand and scale the software to do different things, you may run into challenges later on. So some of those things should be identified early on. And really, your technology should be on at least a 5-year roadmap. Where do you want to be? How far do you want to be? Because the vendors are going to, in 5 years, they're going to change the software, whether you agree to that or not. So I think it's an important thing to identify early on when you're selecting technology. That's actually the right thing, and it makes sense for you from a long term, and it's not just a Band-Aid.
And now is that so? You essentially are also helping them with that alignment of the company goals, like the company roadmap, to make sure that fills in. I mean, what about, obviously, when it comes to technology, this cybersecurity is, again, a big concern. And where does that come in as to using certain types of software over other software? Do you help with that aspect of it as well? Or
yes, I could advise on cybersecurity policy and for the firm, and put some programs together to, one, train the staff. That's, to me, that's a key thing. Most of the targeted attacks come in through your people. So having regular trainings, having education, and so the second part of that is making sure you have a outside provider to make sure that they're doing testing, and making sure that your staff is passing those, and also that your technology is passing all of these security assessments. It's very important, obviously, from a litigation and a risk standpoint, that all of your applications and all of your training align with your cybersecurity insurance policy, which probably also requires a lot of these things. But your clients are also demanding. A lot of clients that we work with, they handle, very high level, high net worth people. And the information that gets handled within CPA firms, is critically important that it doesn't leak out into the wrong hands. And everyone knows what happens to that. But we want to make sure that all of that is secure. And again, some firms, do a good job at it, but really getting, connecting with an outside advisory company who does this type of thing. You also should have somebody who also does mitigation and risk assessment if you do actually come across a breach. It's good to have that person or that company in your back pocket to make sure that they're around and they can help when needed.
Yeah, you're not running around from them when the problem actually comes up. It's you've got them on speed dial, essentially. So, and hopefully you never have to press that button, but sometimes you do, unfortunately.
Yes, and it's becoming more. There's more litigation coming down now too about reporting these types of events. And it used to only really cover like financial institutions, but now it's a state by state, and there's some federal guidelines out there now that you have to report all this to your shareholders and your clients, and so there's a very detailed and regulatory process that people need to use to get this information out there when you do have a breach. So it's important to have someone advise and guide you through that. In addition to that, usually there's some PR, there's some public relations component in there too that people, that companies would need to utilize as well that can be helpful in these types of situations.
Now, I think one of the other core areas that you mentioned is sort of around executive performance alignment, right? So when we talk about that, are you talking about more on the metric side of things? Are you talking about more on the people side of things? Like, what does that look like?
I think it's a combination of both. I think that, as a business, your executive committee or your management committee should come up with whatever those metrics are for you to manage your business, whatever business that is. I think it's different for everyone. But, I know there's certain, industries that look at specific metrics, and those metrics should be adopted and communicated and publicized within the company. Say, these are the things that we're tracking. These are the things that we're measuring. And the executive board's decision his role is to look at those things. On a monthly or quarterly basis, whatever is determined, to make sure that everyone within the company is meeting those goals, and if they're not, what do they need to do to get there? And I think it's the operations, staff, and the people that are in the operations to understand those things, so they know what they're being measured on, so that then they could follow through and make sure that they're meeting those expectations or exceeding them in certain areas.
So are there certain metrics that you would advise from, like, to the executives that they should prioritize, that would be definitely like most impactful for them immediately to see some sort of somewhat immediate traction from that perspective?
Yeah, there are certain KPIs that certainly the executive board should be looking at from a business standpoint. But like I said, every business is a little different and depends on where they're at in terms of maturity. Business has been around a long time. That's kind of running steady state. You're going to want to have different metrics than a company that's only been in business, or maybe a business unit that's only been in production for maybe 2 years or so. You want to have maybe different metrics. And in some cases, you want to revise those metrics to have stretch goals in order to get to the next level. So if the business unit is at 10% and next year you want it to be at 12%, then there's things that need to be put into place to kind of, to get to that level. But yes, those are some types of things that I could help advise on.
Okay. And then the final area, one of the core areas you mentioned was around sort of strategic partnerships and operational support, right? So when it comes to that, my assumption is you're not on the account. You're not helping from the operational support perspective, from going in and helping with taxes or anything like that. But also like the strategic partnerships angle, right? Where are you fitting in? Where are you helping them? And where are you helping the firms actually sort of like implement that area? Like, are you providing them third parties, or is it more you're advising as to these are core areas they should be connecting up with? Like, what does that look like?
It's more on the latter. It's really, it's merely ensuring that, you're making the right decision and you're partnering with the right organization. There's too many choices at this point. And it's very difficult to understand, if you're making the right decision or not without having a lot of work done up front to prepare for the decision to move with this provider forward. I think the big thing is to understanding what you're doing today. Can this potential strategic partner help you get to the next level, and do they align with your mission and your vision of your organization? I think with those things in place, the answer will kind of come to it, to where you want it to be, and it would make sense. But the work really should be done up front, and you just putting out an RFP and asking for responses on something that you're posting out there for support on. And this just covers operational areas, but it also covers a lot of other areas within the business. But to me, there are important things that I've seen best practices of these things implemented, and the results are much more predictable. And the ongoing communication and the partnership with the strategic partner organization is much improved. And both organizations, the firm and the strategic partner, they kind of rise together, as things get better, as time goes on, and it becomes a much more valued partnership.
Yeah, and I see that a lot in my space, right? With the outsourcing, right? I mean, I really push for it's a strategic partnership at the end of the day, right? It's not a lot of them have dipped their toes in different areas, but they haven't put the right investment of time in and effort in as well. Like these are people you're going to be working with, just like they're employees of yours typically, right? You need your cultures to align. You need everybody to sort of be on the same page, so you have a cohesive environment, right, for everything, right? I see it in mergers and acquisitions, right? When somebody acquires a firm, right? It's same thing, right? It's if the cultures don't align and there isn't like a clear goal and vision between it, it's going to be very difficult for the business to succeed as a whole. And that's where some of these acquisitions fall apart, right? Mm-hmm. So now, can you share maybe like a challenge you've seen an organization face when it comes to that, right? As to they haven't been able to implement certain things correctly with an external partner. Like, can you, not maybe a specific example, but like, what was the problem that caused that for it?
Sure. Sure. There's probably a few of them. To me, sometimes the top one is just this culture between the organizations just is not aligned, as you mentioned. That could be a big one, especially if the firm is new to outsourcing, and they're not understanding how to hand off work and how to transfer work, to the outsourcing provider in this particular example. That's a big one. To me, also, doing regular performance reviews and feedback on the outsourcing in this particular example, on a monthly basis, how much work is coming down. Is the work, how's the quality of the work? Does it pass all those tests? Is the information accurate? Volume standpoint, is everyone utilized? Is everyone busy? These are metrics that, again, you're line in outsourcing. These are things that you really want to look at. If you're outsourcing talent acquisition, for example, okay, how many requisitions did you put out for staff? How many positions were filled? How many resumes did you look at? How many candidates were? Those types of metrics, should be reviewed on at least a monthly basis, to understanding where the peaks and the valleys and the trends are, and continual communicating the feedback to make sure that you're meeting those, those expectations, and setting targets. Like I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the call, this is great, right? Strategic partnership, but it can only be strategic if it's helping the business. If it's not helping the business, then it might be time to relook at the decision.
Yeah, and it needs to be measurable, right? I mean, there needs to be a target, like you said. There needs to be measurable metrics around it, right? Where you can now see, okay, yeah, I'm here. I want to get to here. Like, there's going to be something that's easy to measure, so that you can see if it's a success or not, right? And that comes to a lot of different areas in the business, right? That, again, a lot of people just do it rather than not necessarily putting the framework around. And also that comes to implementing the technology and implement it correctly, right? Because a lot of it has the functionality, but do we use it in the right way? Not as much, right? Because that comes to a lot of training. Right. So, no, that's great. I mean, so how do people reach you, Andrew, if they need your help? What's the best way to reach you? And sort of like, when's the best time for them to reach you, right? In that sense as well.
The best way to reach me is through, the Whitman Transition email, Ferrigno@whitmantransition.com. There should be a link in the post. And, my cell phone is, I think, listed in LinkedIn, but you can get me through LinkedIn. I'm on, pretty much anytime. I'm used to working multiple time zones, so it's not too much of a stretch for me.
Perfect. No, and thanks everyone for joining. I hope you found it helpful, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you for tuning in to Business Beyond Borders. I'm Lawrence Whittam, and it's been a pleasure bringing you impactful insights tailored for the modern CPA firm. Remember, the world of accounting is vast and ever evolving, and we're here to navigate it together. For more resources and episodes, don't forget to subscribe and reach out to our experts. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of your business and explore the limitless possibilities beyond borders.